this question, what role does literature play in the classroom? Before I answer that, I would like to answer a more fundamental question. Why do we have literature in our lives at all? What role does it play in society? What role does literature play in life? So when I think about that, I can think of, maybe there are many reasons, but I can think of two broad reasons. I engage with literature because it gives me a lot of pleasure. And I also find that as I engage with literature for pleasure, it also informs me. I don't pick up literature to inform myself. I pick up literature because it gives me pleasure. But as I engage with it, I find that it informs me in a variety of ways. So let me just talk a little bit. Pleasure, we can all understand what we mean by it is enjoyable. But let us think about the different ways in which literature informs us in society, in our lives, etc. One thing that I have noticed is that, when I read a book, it often tells me about people, about places that are quite different from my own life. It takes me to a different world. When I was a young child, there was not a lot of children's literature being published in India. So all of our books came either from Great Britain or it came from Russia. In those days, the Indian market was flooded with fabulous, richly illustrated Russian books, and they were really wonderful to engage with. It gave me a lot of pleasure, but I didn't understand those worlds at all. They had snow and snowmen, and that was at the time when the USSR was still intact. So they used to have these young pioneer camps, and I would keep running to my father and saying, "Ye young pioneer camps kya cheez hai? What is this?" So I wouldn't understand many things about Christmas celebrations in USSR and gymnastics. That's the first time I learned about gymnastics, and so many things that I had no idea about. Now, I'm also thinking about, other books like today I was looking at this book, Hannah's Suitcase, and it's about the World War II and the Jewish children being sent to a concentration camp. Now, if you look at this kind of a book, it is away from us in terms of time as well as in terms of place. And yet, children who read this, read it for pleasure, but they can understand a lot about a different time and a different place in history. So one thing is that literature takes us to worlds that we have not experienced for ourselves, and it opens up those places and makes those realities available to our imagination. Now, if I think about a second very, very important role that literature should play in our lives, is that it permits us to reflect on our own lives and our own realities. Now, you may think, why do we need to reflect on our own lives? After all, we live our own lives. We are experts on our own lives. Why do we need to read more about ourselves? So one reason is that, when we live life happens at a very fast pace, and a lot of it is taken for granted by us. We are not really thinking all the time about every aspect of our lives. What literature does is that it freezes one frame and it allows us to pause and consider our own lives and our own realities. And it makes us reflect. It gives us an opportunity to reflect on aspects and dimensions of our lives that we may have not otherwise thought about. So I'm thinking about a book like The Boy Who Asked Why, वह लड़का जिसने पूछा क्यों. It is by Soumya Rajendran. It's a Tulika book, and it's a book about B.R. Ambedkar's life, and it's written from the perspective of when he was a small child. He kept asking, why am I being treated? Why are children of my caste being treated so differently? Now, Indian children, none of us, no Indian child lives in a society that is free of caste or free of the implications of caste. But every moment of the waking day, we may not be thinking about caste. Whereas when you read a book like this, it may make you pause and ask yourself, really, there are children like this around me. Have I been sensitive to them? Or if you are a child who has experienced this, it may make you think about your own life circumstances and how it, the injustice in society, the inequity in society. So it gives us reasons to pause and reflect on our lives. So one is that it opens up worlds that we have not experienced. Second is it helps us to reconsider aspects of our own lives. So even gender is another thing. I'm thinking of this book, Who Will Be Ning Thao. It is a folk tale set in Manipur. It's by Indira Mukherjee. A.V. Ilyango has done the illustrations for it. Even though a child may be reading it in Maharashtra or in Gujarat or in Haryana, may not be familiar with Manipur, but it raises very important questions about gender, because here is a king and a queen who decide not to give their kingdom to their son, but to their most able child, and the most able child turns out to be the daughter. So a child reading it even in another context could relate it to their own lives and think about how gender plays out in our lives. So it helps us to reflect on issues in our life. Thirdly, literature sort of alerts us to the common human condition. We as human beings, even the youngest amongst us, share certain emotions that bind us all, experiences and emotions that bind us all in common humanity. What do I mean by that? The youngest or the oldest, the richest or the poorest amongst us, we have all experienced common emotions like love, like hope, like fear, like grief and loss, and so on. So when we read literature, even though it may not be set in a context we can identify with, we can always identify with the human emotions and the themes that run across these books, which are very universal: friendship, family, all of these things we can identify with as human beings. There's so many books I can think of. One of them is Kahan Gayi Billi, Where's That Cat by Manjula Padmanabhan. There's this little girl, Minnie, who goes looking for her cat Puni, who's gone missing, and on every page Minnie is worried about the cat and she says, where is Puni? Where is Puni? Now a little child reading this, even if they've never had a cat, or even if their cat has never gone missing, can identify with the worry that Minnie is feeling as she looks for Puni. So in that sense, it alerts us to the fact that as human beings we all share a common human condition. So literature in our lives plays a two very important roles. One is it gives us pleasure and joy, and the second is it informs us. It informs us about our own lives, it informs us about other lives, and it informs us about our shared humanity. So until now, I have been talking about the role of literature in life and in society. I haven't even mentioned classrooms or educational spaces. So let's move the conversation now to the role of literature in classrooms or in schools. I mentioned two primary purposes that literature serves in life. One is that it is for pleasure. It gives us pleasure, and the second is that it informs us. Now these same two reasons would apply equally to educational spaces, right? Because in education we want to definitely inform children and we want them to learn with pleasure. So literature has a very natural connect with educational spaces, and it has a very natural connect with children and their lives, because children can connect very easily, very naturally with literature. It engages their curiosity, it engages their imagination, it engages their experiences. So it makes for a wonderful connect to education. Now I'm going to take it to a slightly deeper level of specificity, and I'll ask this question: what is the role of literature in the early language classroom? Does it have a link to early language and literacy? And here I want to talk about the aims of early language education. So let me first just tell you what are the aims of an early language or literacy classroom, as they are listed out in the position paper on early language and literacy, which was released by CARE India and Ambedkar University in 2016. This is readily available online, and there are 8 aims that this document talks about. The first is, it says that we should try to create a sense of relevance for children in the early language classroom. Relevance means that they should see this as meaningful, not a meaningless exercise, language instruction. The second is that it should help children engage with literate worlds. What does that mean? You know, they should be able to involve themselves. It's meaningful, so they are able to involve themselves and enter those literate worlds in a nice way. The third is that it should help children to comprehend oral and written forms of language. The fourth is that it should help children to engage with the aesthetic dimensions of language. What do we mean by aesthetic? Saundaryatmak, you know. So aesthetic means the beauty of language. Language is art. We should help children engage with language as art. Can you imagine that? It should help children develop multilingual capabilities. A language classroom should help children to develop multilingual capabilities. That's the fifth aim. The sixth aim is that it should help children engage critically with literate worlds. What do we mean by critically? Critically means that they not just read and understand what they have read, but they are also able to challenge it where required. They are able to talk back to the text. This is famous a teacher educator called Lucy Calkins in America, and she has talked about teaching children to read the lines, to read between the lines, and to read against the lines. That means they need to learn to read, of course, but what does it mean to read between the lines? That means to understand what is left unsaid. Most books leave certain things implicitly said or unsaid. The children have to learn to read between the lines, but they also sometimes have to learn to read against the lines. They have to be able to say, "Main ye nahi manta ya manti. I don't agree with this. Why did this happen?" They have to be able to critically engage, and these capabilities are very important in a literate society. They also need to learn to read and write for a wide variety of purposes. That is the seventh goal. And the eighth goal is that they should be able to navigate the written scripts with fluency. Now, if you look at these 8 aims of early language education, if you ask me, I would say that literature plays a very central role in all 8 of them, but at least definitely in 7 out of the 8 aims, it plays a very, very central role. Which is the one aim for which literature is not crucial out of these 8 aims? I'll say maybe वो जो लिपि ज्ञान, अक्षर ज्ञान के लिए, to learn the letters and the script with fluency, maybe you don't really need literature. Maybe you can make do with phonics worksheet or अक्षर वर्णमाला या blackboard या slate. You can make do without literature and children फिर भी साक्षर बन पाएंगे. They can become literate, they can learn the letters and सही उच्चारण से पढ़ना और श्रुत लेख जो करते हैं, they can do all this without literature. Good handwriting, good spelling, correct pronunciation, all of this they can do without literature. But for the other 7 aims, whether it is to navigate, to comprehend oral and written language, to engage with the aesthetic or the artistic aspects of language, to learn to use language for a wide variety of purposes, to engage critically with language, to develop multilingual capabilities, because now we have books available in so many different Indian languages. You could really use literature to help children develop multilingual capabilities. Also to engage and to find this learning relevant to their own lives. For all of this, I would say that it is almost not possible to proceed without literature. So literature is not just, an important, but it is a central and critical part of early language and literacy learning. So as I explained, literature is very central for accomplishing all the aims of an early language and literacy curriculum. But let me just explain that in a little more detail, so that if language educators are listening to me and wondering how to use literature for these purposes, I can give little more clarity on that. So one thing we have to remember is that, we use language. When do we use language? We use language to think and to express our thoughts to others. Also, when we listen to others speaking, it sometimes makes us rethink or think new thoughts that we have not had, etc. So language is not just a means of communicating what we have thought, it's a means of active thinking. And what literature does is that it gives us as educators opportunities to create spaces for this thoughtful discussion in the classroom. So it brings up issues naturally into the classroom which require us to pause and think. And when we think, we talk about what we are thinking, we talk with each other, we listen to each other, we rethink what we are thinking, etc. And through this thinking, expressing, etc., our oral language also automatically develops because we learn to be more articulate, we pick up vocabulary, we pick up more complex grammar, And also, if we are allowed to respond to books in writing, we get opportunities to elaborate on our writing. But most of all, it helps us to think better as a community and to talk about our thinking. So, for example, I'm thinking about this book which is called Kyun Kyun Ladki. Mahashweta Devi has written it. It's a Tulika publication. It's called The YY Girl. There is this little Adivasi girl who grows up in a tribal village, and whenever she encounters anything in her life, she asks, why does this happen in this way? Now, this kind of a book, it could be a book that relates to the child's own context, if the child is a tribal child growing up in that kind of a context. It could be a book that opens up a window into an unknown world, if it's an urban middle class child looking into the lives of tribals and Adivasis. But no matter whether it is close to the child's context or not, it creates opportunities for discussion in the classroom. So, a friend of mine was telling me that when she uses it in the classroom, for example, after this book, after they have discussed this book, children generate their own questions about why in their life, why does this happen, relating to their own life. So, children can come up with very, very interesting questions about why does this happen in this way, why do we do that in that way, etc. So, this creates an opportunity for thoughtful conversation, thoughtful discussion, and through that automatically oral and written language is supported. So, that is one kind. Literature creates spaces for thoughtful discussion in the classroom. That is one way in which it enables the classroom. The second thing is, when children come into our classroom, even if they come into Anganwadi at the age of 3 or whether they come into class 1, they come into our classroom with a certain amount of ओरल लैंग्वेज, जो मौखिक भाषा बोलते हैं वो सारे बच्चे घर में सीख लेते हैं और स्कूल में आके they are able to express themselves to some extent in oral language. So one of our jobs as language educators is to help them elaborate and build on their oral language. A second is to help them move towards the written forms of the language. Now, reading aloud books or children's literature to them is a perfect way to bridge them from oral to written language, because initially when they come, they may not know their aksharas, they may not be knowing how to read literature on their own, but you can share, you can read aloud to them, and you can help them listen. So when they listen, their vocabulary, their comprehension, etc. is growing. But slowly they also get used to the idea that the language is present in written forms and I can access this language. So after you complete a read aloud, you could leave that book for the children to browse. So later they go, they look at that book. Even though they can't read, they can browse and understand ki, this is the story of the book. So slowly they can move from oral to written language. Now when you introduce them to the world of written language, they will also slowly realize that all books are not the same type. There are many different genres or kinds of books available. There are books that tell stories. For example, there is this Chalbaz Chidiya, the trickster bird. It is by Rinchin, and it's the story that a grandmother tells a little child, a little Pardhi child, about how a bird had tricked her grandfather. So this is fiction. So they come across fiction. There are many, many examples of wonderful fiction, and I am not trying to show you all the good fiction available, but I'm just showing you some examples. This is called The Famous Smile. It's a Katha book by Geeta Dharmarajan. It's also fiction. Fiction means Katha which is made up by somebody. It is not a real story, it is made up by somebody. Like that, there is Geet Ka Kamal, and there is this lovely book by Prabhat, Cycle Ka Sapna, where a cycle dreams of becoming a motorcycle. So all these kinds of books, so child knows that you can make up stories and it doesn't need to be real, and there's this fiction. There's also non-fiction books that they can read. These are, non-fiction or kathetar books. Like this one is about the moon. So you can learn about, issues and aspects of your world, not only from textbooks but also from children's literature. So you can learn about the moon. Here is one called Madhumakhiya, and this is about bees. See, this is not your textbook, this is still children's literature. So you can learn about bees. Like that, there are other stories that talk about, you know, people's stories. Like this is my Gandhi story, Meri Gandhi Katha. And so this is about people, historical figures. You can learn about them. So there's Katha, there's Kathetar, and of course we all know there are also Kavitaएं, है ना? जैसे कि this is दूध जलेबी jug. दूध जलेबी जग. Let me see, let me read out like a line or two. दूध जलेबी जग पर इसमें है मग, उल्लू बैठा डाल पर आंखें बड़ी निकाल कर. So all these rhythmic children's poems that we are very familiar with. This one is आपके जापानी haiku. So this is a short collection of haiku, which is another kind of poetry. So you can introduce children to the fact that even within poetry there are different kinds of poetry. Within non-fiction there are different kinds of non-fiction. Within katha there are some kathas which are just like real life. Some kathas could never have happened. How can a frog turn into a man? But in katha sometimes this happens. So you can have fantasy, you can have realistic fiction, you can have all kinds of poetry, you can have non-fiction which tells the story of people's lives, you can have non-fiction where you're learning to make a recipe, you can have non-fiction where you're learning about honeybees, variety of genres. So children can learn about the variety of written forms. They can move from oral to written forms as well as learn about a variety of written forms. A third very, very important and highly undervalued in our classrooms, I would say, use of literature is that it helps strengthen children's capability to narrate, their narrative development. Narrative का मतलब क्या है? Narrative is a katha. Narrative is just a katha. So why should we help children to tell stories? You know, why should it matter? Because in real life, do we need to tell stories? We do actually, you know, like let me just give you an example. Suppose you go meet your friend. What would your friend say? How have you been? Your friend may ask you. What do? You say, Arey, baap re, I was coming to meet you. Suddenly a motorcycle came in front of my car. Then I had to swerve. Then the motorcycle, my God, then a crowd gathered. And what are you doing? You're telling a story. That's what you're doing. And then after some time you'll ask your friend, what happened to you? What happened to, you know, I heard something went on in your family, and your friend will tell you a story in return. When we communicate as human beings, telling stories is not optional for us. Actually, it is very central. We tell so many stories all the time. In fact, there's this very famous educator and developmental psychologist called Jerome Bruner, who said that, you know, this ability to narrate is a primary act of the human mind. We are not able to communicate, to think without narrating. Even in science, when I go to a scientific conference, also a scientist stands up and narrates the story of their research. So to be able to tell a katha is a very primary cognitive capability, because when we tell katha, you know what all we need to do? We need to be able to remember events. We need to be able to relate these events to each other. We need to remember which one happened first, which one happened later. So sequence them. Sometimes there's a cause and effect relationship. Even a small young person can tell you, you know, little things like, मम्मी ने मेरे को डांटा इसीलिए मैं नाराज हो गया, फिर मैंने बिल्ली को मारा, जो भी है. So cause and effect relationship sometimes we are able to find. Even very young children are able to tell brief stories, and of course as they grow older they tell more complex stories, and this can be supported in the early language classrooms. Unfortunately, this is not being supported very well. We are so much focusing when young children come into our classroom on Lipi Gyan and Akshar Gyan that we are forgetting to cultivate these narrative capabilities. So let me give you an example. When, you know, a few years ago, my colleagues and I were conducting this research called the literacy research in Indian languages. It's called the Liral study. And we worked in tribal areas in Maharashtra, in Sonale, Maharashtra, and we worked in Yadgir in Karnataka. These are both very underprivileged areas and communities that we worked in, and we worked in the government schools. So when the children were in grade 2, middle of grade 2, we gave them this book. This is called Aam Ki Kahani, Story of a Mango. It's by NBT. It's a picture book without any words in it. Okay, it's just a wordless picture book. And if you look at it, it's a very simple story. A girl sees an aam, a boy pulls out his slingshot and takes aim. When he hits the mango, a kawa comes, takes it, and so on and so forth. And they have a whole series of adventures with this mango. So we gave this book to the children and we said, look at it and tell us the story in this book. This was the instruction. What we found is that most of the children looked at it and this is what they would say. I'll tell you. Ladka, ladki, ped, chidiya, kawa, whatever. And the research assistants would say, Acha, aur kuch aap kehna chahoge? So they are hoping that the child will tell a story. Now the child looks and thinks, और भी मेरे को कुछ कहना है इसके बारे में, क्या कहूँ? And then they say, आंख, नाक, चूड़ियाँ, etc. So they start giving more and more details. But what we notice is that very few children notice that there is a connection between these pages and actually that there is a story going on. They were describing these pictures frame by frame by frame, middle of second grade. And as I told you, in real life, even very young children can begin to tell stories. So this is not a capability that's for older children. But somehow we are not building on or encouraging this capability in our classroom. And I will argue that narration is a very primary act of the mind and we need it to think clearly. So supporting the narrative capabilities of children is something that literature really helps us to do, because we can narrate, we can ask children to narrate stories, retell stories, and so on. Another very under-discussed aspect of the role of children's literature in the language classroom is illustrations, the role of illustrations. Illustrations, you know, are, we have richly illustrated children's textbooks, and this is art. Very often for the young child who's looking at these books, it's their first introduction to real art. And it helps them to develop aesthetic engagement with the text. Of course, aesthetics of language also matters, not just the pictures, but the pictures bring that aesthetic aspect into the language classroom and helps develop those capabilities. So there's so many wonderful books. Again, I am not trying to give my favorite books or I hope I don't come across as picking some books over others. But I'm just showing you a few lovely books. This is called Tiger on a Tree. It is by Anushka Ravi Shankar. Pulak Biswas has done the illustrations for this book. I'll just show you a couple. Just look at the kind of illustrations. It's black and white and orange. And look at how evocative, how beautiful these simple illustrations are. And they so richly add to the text in the story. Like that, you know, children can be taught to read the illustrations. Here is one where it's called Bulbuli's Bamboo, and yeah, look at this perspective. You could ask the child, from where is the illustrator seeing the child? You know, so you can teach them to look at perspective. There's another picture somewhere of her looking up. Oh, look at this. So, you know, you can teach how from different angles, when you view the same scene, it can look really different. Here's another wonderful book by Mahashweta Devi, Our Incredible Cow. It has been illustrated by Ruchi Shah, and on each page, the cow, this is a cow that doesn't act like a cow. It eats everything that cows are not supposed to eat, and whatever it eats, it becomes that in the illustrations in this book. So when it eats fish and meat and onions, her body is made of onions, and so on and so forth. Like that, I've also been seeing these days that there's a lot of effort by Indian illustrators to include Indian forms of art. For example, this is a Tara book, A Village is a Busy Place, and just look at this. These are very tribal forms of art. And you could introduce children to art from different parts of India, because India is a very rich and diverse culture. Different parts of the world. Why just India? Because literature is not about nation building necessarily. You can introduce them to all kinds of art forms from across the world. So here is one. It's called What Shape is an Elephant. It is by Rumi and the art is by Feroza Gol Mohammadi. It is a Katha book. Again, wonderful illustration, rich illustrations. Just look at this. So Indian illustrators are really experimenting with art forms, and just look. So literature is a wonderful way for language educators to introduce children to art along with the language that goes with it, and thus help fulfill one of the fundamental aims of language education, which is to develop aesthetic responses and aesthetic capabilities in relating to the written form. Also, when you bring literature into the classroom and make books widely available in your classroom, it of course develops children's reading and writing capabilities. I don't need to tell you that children who read a lot of books can read and write and speak much better than children who have not had exposure to books. Their vocabulary, their grammatical formations, their use of metaphor, idiom, all of that are going to be head and shoulders above children who do not have such exposure. But something that we don't take fully into account is that it's not just children's skills and capabilities as readers and writers that grow, but also their identities as readers and writers. So for example, you know, maybe I'm thinking about my daughter, you know, when she was young, I used to put her into various classes and I'll say, "Bachcha jaake taekwondo seekh ke aao," ya "Bachcha jaake art seekh ke aao." She went and developed those skills, whatever was required of her, but she never developed identity as I do taekwondo or I am an artist. On the other hand, somehow when she picked up gymnastics, she so related to it, so identified with it, that suddenly she's off on her own. She thinks of herself as a gymnast, and therefore she does whatever she believes gymnasts do, and she's eager to join the community of gymnasts. Likewise, if we can in the language curriculum open up spaces such that children can naturally relate to reading and writing, so they're not being forced to learn reading and writing, go pick up you know, this Akshar Gyan and come and read with Sahi Ucharan to me, that is important, no doubt. But when you bring literature into the classrooms, many children can so naturally relate and connect with it that very often it helps to build identity as readers and writers. I am a reader, I am a writer. I read because I am a reader, not because my teacher has told me to read. So it helps build stable literate identities. And another thing is, when we share these kind of books in the classroom, it also helps to build community in the classroom. You know, I'm a teacher of adults in the university classroom, and I often take what I think are fairly simple children's books to my adult students who are master's level students. And I might have my own purposes for sharing the books with them. I may be thinking, oh, I'm going to teach them about this aspect of the illustration, or I'm going to teach them how to predict, or whatever. But to my surprise, I go in with one set of purposes for a particular book, but very often a book sparks something in a student that I had not anticipated at all. And they'll suddenly, you know, somebody will raise their hand and say, you know, when you shared this book, it made me think about this time when I had an accident and I was laid up in bed for 2 years. And then suddenly their classmates will look at them, you were laid up in bed for 2 years. We didn't know that. And there's a sudden opening up between human beings which might otherwise not have happened. Sometimes it is not that they share their personal experiences. They may just say, this book didn't work for me because of this reason, or I love this book because of this reason. And just those sharing, that kind of sharing in the language classroom helps build a community which goes far beyond teaching and learning of language. It fulfills some of primary educational purposes, I would say, of helping people to relate not just cognitively but emotionally and as human beings within that classroom community. Also, one last thing I want to say, literature also sometimes introduces delightful language play into the classroom. I was thinking about this book which I don't have with me right now. It's an international book called Tiki Tiki Tembo, and the character's name is Tiki Tiki Tembo, Nosa Rembo, Charibari Ruchi, Pipperi Pembo. Now imagine reading this book, and on every page the mother will call out to the character, or the brother will call out, and the children will just chant along, Tiki Tiki Tembo, Nosa Rembo, Charibari Ruchi, Pipperi Pembo, just like that. Asha Nemaya has a book also. It's called The Village with a Long Name. I'm not sure if it is available in Hindi. And it has the village's name is, I can't remember it offhand, but something like Tayyum Tatta, Tayyum Takka, Takka Dhimi, Shimmi Chimmi Pur, or something to that effect. Asha, if I've said this wrong, I apologize to you, but something to that effect. So this kind of delightful language play in the classroom helps children become aware of the sounds of language, the rhythms of language. It helps them to play with language and find it meaningful. It also supports their phonological development, which is another topic. I will not take that up. It is not just fun, but actually it supports certain very critical language abilities in children. Now the question, till now I've been talking about the role of literature in life and the role of literature in educational spaces as well as specifically in language classrooms. Now let us think about literature in Indian classrooms. I have not addressed the Indian part of it until now. Does literature have a role in Indian classrooms? Have we all encountered literature in our schools? Of course we have. So literature has always been a part of Indian classrooms, but let us think about where and when we met literature in our school lives. When I look back, I can remember, literature period, English literature, Hindi literature being introduced around 7th or 8th grade. I can't remember whether it was in 7th grade or 8th grade. 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade onwards, there is literature in the classroom. And before that, if I think about my elementary schooling, middle schooling years, I can remember some nursery rhyme kind of rhymes, small poems. I can remember some very short stories, but in the textbook, not very richly illustrated, not very well produced, written sometimes for the textbook. It's not that these pieces were already published and then the textbook company took and put it. It could be random people writing for the textbook company, and it has been compiled into ye katha hai, ye kavita hai karke. Even in 4th standard, 5th standard onwards, we had some of these literature. So I would say that one reason is that literature has not been really widely available. Lots of children's literature has not been widely available in the Indian scene until relatively recently. So one reason could be the lack of availability. The other is our imagination of children and their capabilities also. I think we genuinely believe as a society that young children are not capable of deep thought, और young children are not able to engage seriously with literary issues. तो वो तो 7th grade, 8th grade के बाद में करवा लेंगे. छोटे बचपन में सिर्फ अक्षर ज्ञान दिला दो, and as I said, सही उच्चारण, correct spellings. If we focus on this, बाद में जाके हम literary sensibilities develop करेंगे. On the other hand, I hope that through my responses, I have sort of tried to make an argument that not just should literature be made available to younger children, but that without literature, most of the aims and goals of language education and maybe even of education itself cannot be fulfilled even for the younger age groups. And I hope I have shown a variety of examples of books which will convince you that literature is not just for older children. A lot of the books I have shared with you are for young children. And it may not be, maybe the version that I have presented was not in the language that you teach in or work in, but there'll be other books available in the languages that you use. So I would really encourage you to think of your classroom as incomplete without children's literature in it. we need to break this myth that that learning to decode needs to come before we introduce children to literature. Now, if you look at where this myth comes in our minds from, it is from this idea that learning to read is the same as learning to decode. If you think that learning to read is the same as learning to decode, then obviously you will think that बच्चा पहले पढ़े फिर साहित्य की बात करेंगे उसके साथ, है ना? We will think that let the child learn to decode, then we will introduce literature to them. But I hope that I have sort of convinced you that learning to read is about much more than learning to decode. Learning to decode is one important part of learning to read, I don't deny that, but there's so much more to learning to read. As we have been discussing, there is aesthetic engagement with the text, there is comprehension of different genres or types of texts. There is a need to develop a literate identity as a reader, and so on and so forth. There is a need to learn to critically engage with text, to use text for a variety of purposes in one's life, and so on and so forth. So learning to read, learning to write are far broader concepts than learning only to decode. So therefore, if you broaden your understanding of what it means to learn to read and learn to write, then you will see that you don't need to postpone the enjoyment of literature to later grades and later ages. Think about your own childhood. When you were a child, didn't you hear maybe your grandmother, maybe it was a neighbor, maybe it was somebody else, some elder in your community telling you stories? Maybe it was your mother when she put you to sleep. Did she first or he first ask you whether you know all your aksharas before they told you a story? Of course not. How absurd is that, है ना? आपको भी हंसी आती होगी अगर मैं पूछूं कि आपके दादी ने आपसे अक्षर ज्ञान का टेस्ट लिया क्या पहले कहानी सुनाने से पहले? नहीं ना. तो वैसे ही you can pick up a book. It's not just मौखिक कहानी, it's not just oral storytelling. You can pick up a book as a teacher and you can read this book out to a child who has not yet learned to decode. You don't have to wait until they reach 7th grade or 8th grade for that. So for example, this book, I think I mentioned it earlier, Geet Ka Kamal, it's a lok katha. You can read out this lok katha about a woman who wants to sing and so on and so forth. A husband gets her a song, she's practicing the song, a thief comes into her house and there's an adventure around that. So to listen to this kind of a story, a child doesn't need any akshar gyan. You as a teacher can bring many such books. I have been referring to many books throughout my talk. There are so many more available today in the Indian market. So you can do your research as a teacher or as a librarian and bring a wide selection of books to young children. Even if they have not learned to decode, you can read out the book. That is the first thing. Second thing, you can leave books around children. You can create corners where they can browse, whether it's in your classroom, whether it's in a library. I don't know what situation you have where you are working, but you can create little corners where young children who don't yet know their akshar fully can still browse books. So now since the last 30 or 40 years, we know that children don't learn to read by learning aksharas alone. There's a whole continuum they go through. From a very young age, they learn how to look at pictures before they learn how to read. So they can look at the picture and tell you a story based on the picture. They may not be reading the text, but they can say, ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai, and they can narrate a story. I've talked to you about the importance of narrative development earlier. So they can narrate their own story. So what if it is not the story that is in the book? If children sit together and browse together, you'll see very interesting dialogues and conversations between them. They'll negotiate the story, they'll create a new story. Maybe it's not the story in the book, it's still an important milestone. Or maybe they'll remember the story that you told them and try to retell it. All these are part of what we call emergent literacy behaviors, and it is all to be encouraged. You shouldn't discourage them from looking through books, browsing through books, looking at pictures and telling the story as they see fit. So this myth that you need to postpone literature to the later grades is something that I really hope I have helped you dismantle, and that you will bring literature to children from the very earliest of ages. How young? How young can children be when you introduce them to literature? I started reading to my daughter when she was a newborn baby. Now, as a teacher, you may not meet children when they are newborns, but you may meet them when they are 2.5 years old and they come into your Anganwadis, or you may see them when they are 5 or 6 years old and they come into your first grade classrooms. Whichever age you meet children, please show them good children's literature and introduce them to the world of children's literature. So before I end, I also want to talk about two false dichotomies I come across very often as a language educator. One of them is this reading to learn versus learning to read. So this is related earlier to what I was talking about. People think that बच्चे पहले पढ़ना सीखते हैं और फिर जानकारी के लिए पढ़ते हैं. The child first learns to read and then reads to learn. I feel that this is a completely false dichotomy, because this comes from an assumption that learning to read means learning Akshar Gyan or learning to decode. The minute you widen that, as I have been saying, to include all the other aspects of reading and writing, you will see immediately that a child is learning to read even as they are reading to learn. So let us assume that you read out a book to the child, or the child reads a book. Let us think about this Why girl, Kyun Kyun Ladki, which I have spoken about earlier. The child is, when the child engages with a book like this, as I've told you, there are already critical discussions, conversations about Adivasi life, about justice and inequity in society, so many things that the child is learning about. At the same time, are they learning to read? Of course they are learning to read. It's not just Lipi Gyan that they are learning. They are learning how to engage with the written world. They are learning how to engage as a literate person. They are learning how to think back to text. They are learning to read the line, read between the line, and read against the line. They are learning styles of writing, because when somebody reads out a story to you, you are not just listening to the story. Subconsciously, you are picking up different ways in which authors communicate their ideas, and sometimes when you sit down to write, you may find yourself using some author's style. So they are learning how to think like an author, and they may use certain aspects of style that sticks in their imagination later in their writing. So they're learning a lot about reading and writing, even if you're not teaching them K-Kha-Ga at that time. So they're learning to read, and at the same time they're reading to learn. So I don't see this as a very valid distinction at all. There is another distinction that I often encounter when I talk to people in the field, and one of them is is the child is reading to learn versus reading for pleasure. So the teacher or the parent thinks that as long as the child is reading to learn, this is okay. But if they are reading for pleasure, it's some pastime or hobby of theirs, and it's something that we should make as minimal as possible. Again, this is a false distinction. Think about your own reading. Let us say you don't read a lot of literature, but let us say that in the morning you get up and you pick up the newspaper every morning. Are you reading to learn, or are you reading for pleasure? You may say, well, I'm reading to learn. I'm reading to learn the news of that day. Yes, you are reading to learn the news of the day, but do you get a certain pleasure from reading the paper? Suppose for 3 days I took the paper away from your routine and you are used to reading the paper. Will you miss it? Of course you will miss it. So there's a certain pleasure that we get even when we are reading to learn, and likewise when we are reading for pleasure, we learn so much. As I told you initially, we read for pleasure, but we also read to inform ourselves. When we read for pleasure, we learn about worlds that are far away from us. We learn to reflect on aspects of our own life. We learn about the human condition. So we are definitely learning when we are reading for pleasure. So this kind of a dichotomy, in fact, this very prominent high school educator of the 1930s, Louise Rosenblatt, she is one of the people who really made educators question this dichotomy in their minds. And she said, when we read to learn, she called it the efferent stance. Don't worry about the terminology. She means to get information from the text. Don't worry about her terminology. She said that sometimes when we read, we are trying to get information from the text. Sometimes when we read, we are trying to get pleasure from the text. But this is not two different things. This is along a continuum. It's along one single continuum. So sometimes we get more pleasure, less information. Sometimes we get more information, less pleasure. But usually both of these are mingled together. It is not that now I'm reading for information and now I'm reading for pleasure. So for example, my 13-year-old daughter, who was into the Harry Potter series, once came and pointed out to me, and she said, "Ma, have you realized that most of the characters in Harry Potter combine good and evil in the same character, which is quite unusual in children's books." Now, my daughter didn't pick this up. In this case, she may have thought of it on her own, but she didn't pick up the habit of reflecting on books on her own. She goes to a school where the adults around her encourage her to reflect on the books that she reads. And because she's had this consistent encouragement to reflect, now she's able to apply that capability to books that she's reading. So even when she's seemingly reading purely for pleasure, she's also learning. She's learning about characters and character analysis and plot development and language and so much more. So two dichotomies. One is that learning to read is not very different from reading to learn. When you read to learn, you also learn to read and to learn to become a reader. And the second is that when you read for pleasure, you also learn. You cannot avoid learning when you read for pleasure. So as educators, as parents, it's fine to let your children and students read for pleasure, because they are definitely reading to learn at that time as well. So today I have talked to you about the role of literature in our lives, in society, in educational spaces, as well as in the language classroom. I am an early language and literacy educator, so I have talked mostly from that perspective. So I've tried to convince you that literature is very central to the work of language educators, and I'm sure it is central to the work of other educators. I may not have addressed that as clearly. And I have also tried to broaden our idea of what it means to learn to read. I've tried to encourage people to get away from thinking that learning to read is the same as learning to decode. And the minute you broaden this idea of reading, you will see that literature enters into the youngest of classrooms. So you don't need to wait until children are in middle school or high school to introduce them to literature. Nor do you have to bring very, very simple Bal Geet and very simple Bal Katha to young children. You can introduce even young children to fairly complex stories, as long as you transact it in an age appropriate manner. You can take fairly simple ideas which are not simplistic. There's a difference between these two words, simple and simplistic. You can have simple but powerful narrations which will enable children to give space for you to engage them with discussion, with language development, with critical thinking, with aesthetic response, and so on and so forth. Finally, I have tried to sort of break this understanding of this false dichotomy between learning to read, reading to learn, and reading for pleasure. And I've tried to show that these are all one interconnected part of one whole, which is language education.